Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is December 1st, believe it or not, and you are listening and watching the Daily AI Show live. Now, let's see if I can do a really good job here of taking this away and bringing us on. Hey, there we are. And so today, how about it was way smoother than yesterday? I'm already getting better at this.
All right.
Episode 85, and I've got this down. Hey, you're listening to watching the Daily AI Show live. Like I said, it's December, which is hard to believe. Big push to the end of 2023, and what a year it's been, right? So today we have almost everybody. We're just missing Robert, which means we have Jyunmi, Beth, Karl, Andy, Eran, and I'm Brian. And today we have a fun topic, or at least I think it's fun. We'll see. We'll see what everybody else thinks on this one, which is qstar. And again, I cannot say it without saying qstar because I just feel like it goes with it at this point. Yeah, exactly. It just makes me think of Lone Star from Spaceballs, and then I have to say it like he says it in deep voice from Spaceballs. Nothing I can do about it. So I'm not even going to try to summarize this. I think the best person to summarize this and kind of kick this off, Karl, is probably you, because I feel like you were the one that brought this up initially. We purposely pushed this particular episode out full week and a half almost, I think, from when it first came on, or from when it first came up in conversation. And that was so that I felt like all of us could do our due diligence and try to become as educated, and I've just scratched the surface myself. But hopefully by the end of this 30 minutes, our audience will have a better understanding of where it is, where it came from. The fact of the matter is we don't exactly know what qstar is. We only have hints, allegations, and things left unsaid by Sam Altman and others at OpenAI. So I don't know, Karl, do you want to kind of kick this off? And I will say that Sam Altman did, I don't know if you saw this, he did kind of say he admitted it and then said it was an unfortunate leak. So it's kind of a this qstar is a thing, but it's an unfortunate leak and I don't want to talk about it is basically what he said at a conference. So Karl, why don't you kick us off, tell us all the things, and then we'll dive in.
Okay, so I think before we go into qstar, maybe let's rewind this whole thing just a little bit. And we have to kind of go back to, I think, has it only been a week ago since Sam Altman has been let go and then come back? Has it only been 2
because he was already back in place by Thanksgiving of last year. Thanksgiving of last week.
Yeah. So at that time, I think there has been a lot of now this is a lot of speculation, although he did do a Verge interview with a Verge reporter, and and in that article, he said it was a leak. It didn't connect it to anything else, but did say it was a leak. So let's just do a quick rundown. It's more like, so there is a project called qstar, so that is confirmed. It was leaked, and the speculation around it is it has potential to solve complex problems, which the additional speculation is that it can solve certain mathematical problems, although at a grade school level, which then translates as the first steps towards artificial general intelligence. More speculation is that because of that development, it alarmed some researchers at OpenAI because of AI safety, presented those findings to the board, which may have kicked off the whole OpenAI drama. Now,
even though they said it wasn't safety related.
Exactly. So we, again, put that aside. And then,
real quick on that, Karl, just on that point, if I remember right, this is again 2 weeks ago, but a lot has happened. If I remember right, it was that the board was saying that they found Sam not to be 100% truthful with the board. And so I wonder if this report comes out of this qstar thing, whatever it is, there's a report to the board. They ask Sam about it and Sam goes, no, nothing. Nothing really there, and the board's like, we know there's something there. So, I mean, hard to say behind closed doors and all that kind of stuff, but I wonder if it was something like that where they knew he knew, and he didn't come clean about it or something to that effect, and that caused them to quote unquote lose faith in his ability to see through the mission of OpenAI.
And remember, there was that a couple months ago. Was it a couple months ago or a couple weeks before his being let go? He mentioned that he was pushing the veil of ignorance back, right? Whatever that meant.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying that. So you're like, well, what does that mean? Like, what did you see? So again, tons of speculation.
Him saying that was the day before he was let go.
Oh, the day before. Forget months before. The day before. Okay.
The thing that he was talking about was 2 weeks approximately before he made, like he referenced 2 weeks prior. He was referring to something 2 weeks.
Yeah.
In his statement.
And which kind of gets you thinking too, because I have yet to hear about a board that releases any type of CEO without telling one of their biggest investors, without having a communications plan in place, not let alone a plan to replace said person, and then who asked several people in a row if they want to become CEO. So it's a very strange, if you look at that kind of development from the whole, especially a group of people who left the company and started their own company and wanted to merge the companies. So it's a very...
It felt more like a military coup than it did a modern day business practice of CEOs being released. It was ridiculous.
So what could justify that?
Yeah.
Right?
So
like
why don't before we get into the justification, all that, qstar is, I think, the upgrade to, let's go into Q learning. Right. So Q learning is a type of reinforcement learning. And I've kind of made some notes on this. So it's a method in AI where agents learn to make decisions by performing actions, receiving feedback in the form of rewards or penalties. And it involves learning a function so that it can predict the value of given action or in a given state. But what I did was I made I asked ChatGPT to give me how would you define Q learning as if it's a role-playing game. And so let's go through this a little bit. So it's states and actions. So essentially, like an RPG, the world's full of places you can visit. It's forests, dungeons, lawns, towns, wherever. And each of these places represents a state. So, and each of these places or states has a different challenge that could lead to rewards or penalties. And then each action is essentially what the hero or the AI can do to make various choices. And whatever you do has consequences, rewards, or penalties. And what it is you're every single time you take an action, you learn from what happens next. So find treasure, gain experience points, reward. Fall into trap, lose a battle, that's a penalty. And these penalties and rewards help you learn what the actions are, what the choices are in the future. Then you have Q values. So it keeps track of the experience that you're getting. So think of Q values as your experience points. And they're just notes in your adventure journals. So again, every place you visit, actions, rewards, and penalties. Then you have a Q table. And they're sort of like a guidebook for your adventure. So whenever you're deciding what to do next, you check your guide and you look up all the things that you've already done. So what the current state is and which actions have the highest, I guess, Q value or the best predicted outcomes. And then as you continue your adventure, your guidebook, your Q table gets more detailed because you do more things, you're getting better from the rewards and penalties. And gradually you make better choices because of your experience. So I always equate it to like, oh, it's like life. Like the AI just keeps learning as it's, I guess, growing up or taking more actions. And so in our RPG analogy, Q learning is like you, the hero, learning the best actions to take in each situation based on past experiences, with the ultimate goal maximizing your rewards throughout your adventure. And eventually there will be some sort of end goal. That's like a basic Q learning.
Got it.
Okay.
I'll do a verbal TLDR on that.
Sure.
So Q learning is an algorithm. It's a reinforcement algorithm, as you say, but it captures a way of achieving self-guided, trial and error based examination of various actions that are taken successively by the AI, and that in a place where there isn't a policy that it can follow. There's no policy. It just has to try, and then it uses this algorithm to capture what the value of each of those actions was and learns progressively. So it's an autonomous, self-directed reinforcement system, which is different from human-driven reinforcement of an AI process. That's human in the loop kind of thing. And also, reinforcement learning where there's a policy that expresses mathematically what good outcomes are versus bad outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Right. And also what happened earlier this year was that Ilya was repositioned to head the super alignment team, which is to solve the problem of how do you how do you interject the human perspective when what is happening is beyond human comprehension, right? Mm-hmm. So to add to that, yeah. And the other thing that I think is important to sort of bring into this, as humans, we can sort of go one path at a time. AI is not limited to that. So in the trying different paths and coming to its own analysis, that can happen simultaneously, which is part of why this is such a big, this can make it learn really quickly.
And that's something I read actually just today. And then I want to introduce some other terms that might be of value. But that's something I learned today, Beth, which was talking about the speed. That same article that I read, it might have been the Verge one that was talking about Sam calling it an unfortunate leak. At the bottom of it, it was talking about how it's called there's two of them, right? And or three of them. But anyway, like decision tree matrix and stuff. And then one of them is called the Monte Carlo. I want to get it right. The Monte Carlo tree search, MCTS, which has been around for a long, long time. But what they were talking about is like the same technology years ago that was used for AlphaGo in order to beat the world's best Go players. I've never played the game before, but the understanding for Go is that there's more possible directions or actions than there are atoms in the universe. So just absolutely a hard to wrap your brain around absurd amount of options. And AlphaGo was able to use these technology years ago in AI, to beat the best players. And so a lot what I was reading too is like a big part of, maybe a big part of this qstar is actually the speed of it, because if these AI new systems or language models are able to comprehend millions of possible outcomes, and then using some of the stuff like Karl talked about, like Q learning, and I want to introduce a few others here too that I was researching that may or may not, I'm not sure where it is. It's more for good discussion, but the idea that they can work through them so much faster that it's essentially for humans, it's in real time, even though there's a time delay to it. To us, to our perception, it's in real time. So driving a car, these are the kind of things, and all the different sensors and everything else. It has to be obviously much, much better than a human can react to it or whatever. And then all the other different ways that this, health and everything else that this could be applying. But I thought it was really interesting how they said, a big factor of this could be what you were saying, Beth, which is, speed, ultimately how quickly the model can produce what I was reading as perhaps what qstar is. Karl, you mentioned the actions in the Q table. I was reading the qstar could be referring to ultimately the best possible action in any given state, meaning for the rewards that it would get. So with qstar is the best possible thing that can happen, and processing that in such a way because they were talking about how cars have onboarding computing, right? And there's a limit to how fast their processors can do it. But perhaps this is a huge jump forward. And that is actually a step towards AGI, because now if things are happening on smaller processors with, less RAM or whatever you want to call it, processing power, yet they're able to do lightning fast, near imperceptible speed of light type decisions for millions of parameters. What does that mean for us as humans and the interactions that we have on a day-to-day basis? So I thought that was really, really interesting.
So that brings another Q into the equation, which is often referenced in the context of the qstar mystery, and that is quantum computing. So this is about speed. Quantum computing has a many orders of magnitude faster process than typical computers. So you couple the idea of this advanced algorithm for self-learning with really, really high speeds in a quantum computer, and the combination of those two gets you very close to all the necessary ingredients for artificial general intelligence.
Well, and so we talked in the the drama about OpenAI show about their mission to and what was coded into their structure in terms of the mission. When artificial general intelligence is reached and the board gets to decide when it's reached, then that is to the benefit of all humanity. There's no more IP kind of stuff about that. But this brings up the possibility of super narrow intelligence, which means that it is still it's outside of that. I haven't heard anybody talk about what happens in that case. Seems like it's still an IP kind of thing, and you can
profited from.
Yeah. So and they have sort of shifted. They're still talking about general intelligence, but they're also talking about super intelligence, which I've heard people talk about. That's what's next, and I'm thinking that's what's precursor to artificial general intelligence. But
so I thought that Karl's analogy was awesome with the a role playing game and a mysterious environment that you have to navigate. But Eran, you're saying you've got another analogy that'll help us understand this.
Yeah, so I like everyone, no one really knows what qstar is really. I mean, it's all speculation at this stage. So,
some people do.
Yeah,
just not here.
Not this group.
None of us.
Unless someone on Reuters is on the inside. But in me trying to do some research and wrap my head around it, I mean, I'm not a coder, I'm not a propeller head engineer or anything like that. One of the terms I came across was something called A*star, which has been a well-established computer algorithm for many years, and it's basically designed to solve problems. And so Karl was I said in the comments that when Karl was talking about a role-playing game, I said this gave me flashback moments to my misspent youth playing D&D. But anyway, so you would think the way I thought of it was A*star, which is old school but has been around for a long time, works. So it's like trying to solve a maze. So you're standing in front of a maze, you've got an entrance and you've got an exit somewhere else, and we assume that the walls aren't changing and any weird stuff going on. You can manually, A*star is kind of the brute force way of getting through. Let's go forward. Do we turn left? Do we turn right? Do we go forward? And there's so many possibilities they can calculate, and this is where that whole go thing is. There's literally zillions of possibilities. So you can get through, but it takes time, and there's a lot of computational work involved in getting through complex stuff. qstar, I kind of see it like you're in front of the entrance to the maze, but you can float and you can see the beginning point and the end point, and you can very quickly go, I'll go, and it adds out. And it's like when a human becomes good at something, they can quite often just look at a situation and go, oh yeah, I know exactly what's going on, and it makes that intuitive leap. Now, I don't know if it was you who said this in the past, Brian, or whether I read this somewhere, but I remember reading something about a guy who was was a firefighter. So I'm handing you a firefighter analogy here. Yeah, exactly. But
I'm excited. I'm leaning in.
this guy who had been a firefighter for 20 or 30 years, and he turns up at a fire, and he can look around in 20 or 30 seconds. He
The
knows
Brian story.
he knows what's going on, whereas the newbie stand there going, holy shit, there's a lot of flames and it's hot and it's dangerous. And I see qstar as being that the algorithm has learnt intuitive pathways, the best pathways, so it can speed up the process of getting from point A to point B.
Eran, we didn't even plan this, and you have an amazing kickoff because when I need an analogy, I go to firefighting. So I'm going to give you the firefighter robot analogy here. I'm ready. This is what I spent my time in doing. We're going to talk about A-star, Q learning, qstar perhaps, and hyperheuristics. Okay, these are a couple new terms in here. So we already talked about A-stars. This is a great kickoff to this. All right. You got a firefighting robot, and its goal is to safely navigate through a burning building, locate individuals needing rescue, and bring them to safety while also determining if it can extinguish any fires along the way. All right, starting with A-star. Pathfinding. A-star is used for navigating the robot through the building. It helps the robot find the shortest and safest path to the individuals and back to safety. And so in a dynamic environment, since the environment, a burning building, is changing rapidly, A-star algorithm would need to be run frequently and update the path as new obstacles and falling debris or spreading a fire appear. So now how will we overlap that and put in Q learning? Well, Q learning comes into play for making decisions that aren't just about pathfinding. So not just what A-star does. For example, deciding whether to rescue a person immediately or extinguish a fire nearby that possesses an immediate threat. This happens all the time as a firefighter. Which one needs to be done right away? Does the car swerve and hit the baby in the stroller, or does it wreck into 5 other cars, right? We hear these kinds of things come up. Learning from experience. Over time, the robot faces various fire scenarios. It learns which action to choose a path, rescuing individuals, using water, etc., to yield the best outcomes. Now, this is where it thinks qstar learning might come into play. So this is hypothetical. Or perhaps in each situation, a room layout, fire intensity, person's location, to what Karl was saying, qstar would hypothetically represent the best action the robot can take in any situation. For instance, it might learn that in a high intensity fire, the best thing to do is to prioritize human life, which is always going to be the case, life over property. Okay, so now we bring in the last part here, the hyperheuristics. So in hyperheuristics would be used to determine the best overall strategy. For instance, deciding when the robot should switch between rescue mode and fire extinguishing mode. In complex environments, the hyperheuristic system might analyze past data and current conditions to choose the most effective combination of pathfinding, A-star, and the decision-making strategies of Q learning. So in real-time scenario, the firefighter robot uses A-star for efficient navigation, constantly recalculating the best paths and environment changes. Simultaneously, it's using Q learning to help make sure it makes critical decisions based on the growing experience and varied firefighter situations. qstar might be the best possible action in any state, like Karl was saying. And meanwhile, the hyperheuristics oversees the entire process, adapting the robot's overall strategy to the complexity and dynamics of the situation, ensuring that the robot's actions are always aligned with the ultimate goal of saving lives and minimizing damage. End scene.
Yeah.
That to me makes sense. I can visualize every bit of that. I can put myself in a burning building, and I will tell you the things that were coming into play when I was a firefighter were like heads-up displays and nighttime vision and not even nighttime vision, but heat mapping and stuff like that. Because unlike the movies and Backdraft and stuff like that, when you're in a fire, you can see this close. You can't see anything else. There's no, hey, buddy, across the room. It is 100% blacked out, and you're going by senses that are not sight and stuff. So that seeing this and thinking about this is amazing to me.
So that was a great advancement of our net of analogies that are helping understand qstar, because it introduced robots. And robots are an expression of artificial intelligence ultimately, right? So now you can start to see how this qstar development within OpenAI is going to be beneficial for all kinds of applications, but it's going to be uniquely well suited to giving the kind of intuition as we humans try to describe this thing that Eran was referring to, and putting it into an actionable state. Because overall, Q learning is all about taking actions and learning through those actions what the changes to state are and what the resulting reward or penalty is for those. And that's the way humans learn. You
Right.
put your hand on a fire, a hot plate, and I'm not going to do that again. Right? That's not a good thing to do without checking.
And
And
I wanted to.
most people don't even, as humans, we don't even really know how we learn. Like a lot of it is subconscious, I think, and I think it takes some pretty smart people to try and break that down into discrete, duplicatable processes to code computers with. So you need some pretty smart people to come up with that sort of stuff.
Just to speak to Brian, your analogy again, spot on. And to what Andy was saying is what my immediate impression, and I think this might be. I mean, for me, this is what came to me as you were breaking down. This breaks down to value, skill, or values, skills, and experience. Right. So each of those learning methods, what is your priority? That's your values. What skills? That's the decisions of making those firefighter choices, fire or choices there. And experience is that overall strategy. So I think if we want to apply that human viewpoint to when we're analyzing and we're learning all of these different methodologies, algorithms, Q learning, qstar, that's what it kind of breaks down to. So just remember, each learning type breaks down to your values, your skills, and your experience. I think that's a really good way to look at it.
So I got a quick question for you guys as a group. So as I understand it, one of the ways that this initially rose out of the OpenAI world was the idea that they could do basic mathematics. So, and I don't know who the best, Karl might be the best one to talk about this. Talk to us about where is the implications for mathematics? Like most people probably think, ChatGPT is so smart it can do anything, but when it comes to basic mathematics, it can't. Why? Is that something you can talk about, Karl?
I was gonna link that to. Remember, if any of you watched that Andre Karpathy video on LLMs, there's a little bit there he was talking about system 1, system 2 thinking. And you know how in our prompting, it's always great to put the chain of thought, like, hey, think through this step-by-step piece. But currently, as he mentions, large language models at the moment don't do that at all. Like you have to prompt that, but it actually doesn't do that. It actually can't, like, and for our audience, system 1 thinking is, say if someone asks you 2 + 2, you'll know automatically. It's like, 4. And that's how a lot of large language models are. It's like, here's a question, it automatically goes and answers it. But system 2 thinking is, Eran, to your point, if we have a very complex math problem, or even a simple one like 4,673 divided that into 27 or 324, some of you, very few, will be able to just immediately pop the number out, but you have to actually think through it. So that ability to do, when they say basic math and think it through and actually pop an answer and be able to go through it, I think that's like the small piece of where it maybe. So Beth, you're talking about super intelligence or versus artificial general intelligence. Like maybe that is the bridge or the next step before you get into artificial general intelligence, is that it can do system 2 thinking, which I feel if he said it, and there was a nice interesting tweet from Ethan Mollick saying, you have one of the most secretive companies, yet a whole bunch of their employees are just randomly saying things.
Yeah.
You'd think most of them eventually will be true. And what he was saying is like the next pieces will have that system 2 thinking. I'm thinking they already have it. It's already doing it. They're just testing it. And it's like, right. So GPT-4 was around when they launched, I think GPT 3.5, but they were still testing it. So I can imagine something's there that they're testing right now that will be released, I don't know, 2024, whenever that
I
is.
agree with
So-
that, because they said on Dev Day, he was talking about how custom GPTs were a step in the direction of agents.
Yes.
And I agree with you, Karl, which is they're not playing internally with whatever we're seeing externally, obviously.
No.
They're playing with agents and showing us custom GPTs
Yeah.
for something like that.
Yeah.
Do they
Right.
internally have AGI? I don't know. I don't know. I think they clearly are seeing a path. He said it in the article today that I read, or I guess when he was asked about it, he said, look, I don't want to talk about it. But he said, we're progressing, and we're going to keep the world abreast of what's going on. And of course, you could hit roadblocks, but we like the direction we're going, and we're going to continue pushing in that area or whatever. So I agree with you. Whatever we're seeing, obviously, is a bit delayed from whatever they're doing. They're creating on Mars, and we're getting the signal, however many minutes, hours, months later from what they're creating on Mars, because we're not there. We're not in the room, and they're ahead of it, obviously, especially because we're seeing the very end result of it, which is the deployment. You figure how many testing phases to make sure it wasn't going to, at what point is it an MVP, minimally viable product? And, at what point is it good enough to go out to the things, the general audience? So, I mean, I'm thinking these things are around for months and months before they ever hit our eyes.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, and we're seeing improvements every few months, where are they today?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
What
And
we're going to see at
how
the end of 2024? I don't know.
dangerous
Maybe.
are these products like right now in their current form, right? And I would imagine when he says I push back the veil of ignorance, you're like, what did you see? And what does it look like in its crazy like current form? And then how do they actually, with feedback and guardrails and stuff, be able to release it to the public? So it's very fascinating. And I bet here's the bet. Do you think it'll be released before Gemini or after Gemini?
At this point, it's before. We know your views on Google. But
I'm going to say
Brian,
after
to what
Gemini,
you
but
say-
we're already going to know Gemini sucks, so it won't matter.
Right. Oh, there you go. There you go. So, but to Brian, what you're saying though is a really viable answer to why the board made their decision in the first place.
Yes.
Right.
Because it does take development cycle, right? And if your leadership, your C-suite says move it faster, or we're just going to go ahead and release it, and that isn't communicated. So, I mean, I can see that as a totally viable answer is Altman said, release it, do the MVP as quickly as possible, whereas the board's going, wait a second, what are you talking about?
Well,
and it blows up.
And it doesn't even need to be that, right? Like the board didn't need
Yeah.
to ask him and have a lie happen. It could easily just be, yo, like this is the stuff that like we should not be learning this through the news cycle
This is
or
that
the
realm.
OpenAI dev thing. Like, and again, we're all speculating, but
Beth, I think you're right. I think the board was miffed because there was something that was a serious and important development that he wasn't being fully forthcoming about to the board. And they were learning it too late.
Which
and
is
they
weird
didn't like
because
that
Ilya was on the board.
That's their primary responsibility is governance.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just find that odd though, because Ilya was on the board, and I have a hard time believing that he wasn't in the room when any of this breakthroughs were happening. But admit, I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, but he
obviously.
might not have been saying it.
Maybe.
He's on the outs now because he
I know.
was implicated in all of those things.
Yeah.
And
Did you
with,
see
like
Sam?
organizational hierarchy structure, right? Like your chief scientist probably doesn't go to the board and say, "Oh, by the way, we did something really cool." You'd like that's the proper channel for that is your executive.
And by the way, it may be that it wasn't an accidental slip that Sam Altman revealed that something was happening. It could have been Ilya, who said to the other members of the board privately, this is going on and I don't feel good about it.
Right. That's what I assumed. That's what I assumed. Right. I know in Sam's internal, we can kind of wrap it up here, but in Sam's internal letter that came out, I saw it yesterday to the OpenAI. It was an internal memo to, well, I mean, it was public, but it was his message. And it was the first sort of long-term, and he mentioned a lot of names in this memo. But one of the ones was obviously in there was Ilya, and it talks about how he harbored no ill will and that he's always enjoyed working with him. But the sentence that was telling to me, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it in front of me, was we're working to find a way, although Ilya is no longer on the board, we're working to find a way how he can continue to work with OpenAI. And I thought, ooh, that's I don't know if he meant it to be telling. I don't want to read between the lines too much on it or whatever, but I definitely think there's there's more to that story of, hey, Ilya, do you still want to be part of what we're creating here? But your role is been limited a bit. He definitely doesn't have the board member. And then in that same message, we saw how, I think everybody knew this, but Microsoft will have a non-voting spot on the board, which everybody said, hey, the best person coming out of all of this is Microsoft. And here we are seeing Microsoft will in fact have a spot on the OpenAI board, although it will be non-voting. I'm not super up and intelligent on all things board related, so I'll stay out of that. But I think that's all very interesting. What I would say to our audience is go check out that memo by Sam Altman if you're curious. You can find it online. I'm sure I found it yesterday, where, again, he names a lot of people. And if I had a lot of time, I would go dig in and research all the names he said, because a lot of them were just first names. But it was really, really interesting. And I think sort of sets us up for 2024 and where all this is going, whether it be qstar or any of the other developments that might happen before that or in between that. And again, we kind of said it here, whatever we're seeing, we're on Earth, they're on Mars, right? Or vice versa. And so we're not seeing real time inside OpenAI. And so it's easy for us to go, why would the board care about that? Well, whatever we know, that's not what they care about. They perhaps care about something that we won't even see or have knowledge about for 6 months or longer. And I think that's always really, really smart to just kind of keep in the back of your head, is that we don't have all the knowledge in real time to what these companies are doing because of the process of developing and deploying these technologies, or GPT-5 or whatever that might be. Okay, well, listen, we'll wrap it up here. I hope our audience or anybody watching this, listening, got a little bit more out of this. If nothing else, maybe you understand, like, why do I keep hearing this term qstar? Or maybe you didn't even know it was qstar because it looks like Q asterisk. So maybe you were saying Q asterisk. I didn't know either. So, it's really, really interesting. I think everybody's ears kind of perk up when somebody like Sam Altman says, I've pulled back the veil. We've pulled back the veil of ignorance. That's a big statement. And him sitting on stages and saying, I've witnessed, a push 4 times since I've been with this company. And the latest of those happened 2 weeks ago. This is when he was sitting on that stage. So now this is maybe a month prior. A really, really interesting time. But hopefully you got something out of this conversation today. If nothing else, it piqued your interest to go look into it a little bit more. And of course, as more comes out, we will be right here on the Daily AI Show to give our opinion of it and talk about it more. So this will definitely not be the last time this comes up. All right, that's it for another great week on the show. Happy December to everybody. And come on back. This was 85, episode number 85. So come on back next week. See us again.
Not many sleep before Christmas.
Yeah, it's coming, right?
Yep.